Okay, so on notes 9.5, we're going to be solving a radical equation. So a radical, remember, is like a square root, cube root, fourth root, so on. Okay, so the steps for solving a radical equation is to isolate your radical term. So just like on 9.4, we were isolating, or 9.3, because we skipped 9.4. 9.3, we were isolating the base with the rational exponent. Okay, so we're going to isolate the radical. To get rid of that radical, we either square it, cube it. We do the opposite of whatever we're taking, what root. Okay, we're solving for x, and then we're checking for extraneous solutions. Remember, that means if you work it out, you find your answer, you plug it back in, and it doesn't work out. So on number 1, what I want you to do is I want you to circle your radical. Just like on 9.3, we were circling the base with the rational exponent. Notice that there's not anything circled on the left side, okay? So it's already isolated, so I'm going to step 2. This right here, remember, is the same exact thing as 1/2 power. When we had a rational exponent, to get rid of that, we took the reciprocal, which would be 2, okay? Same thing here. We are taking the square root of something, so the opposite of that is to square it. So I'm going to square both sides, because whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So whenever I have a square root and I square it, it just cancels out. I'm just left with the base, or the radicand, which is 7x minus 18 equals 5 squared, which is 25. Okay, so from here, we're going to add 18. So we end up with 7x. That would be 43. Okay, and divide by 7. Okay, notice we have a fraction, so let's leave it in fraction form. Now, remember we talked about with rational exponents, we always had to look at that top number. On all of these, since we have a square root, a cube root, a fourth root, all of them are going to be like a 1/2, a 1/3, a 1/4. So that top number is always going to be an odd. So you won't ever have any two answers on these. Okay. All right. So we're going to check it. Okay, so when we multiply 7 times 43 over 7, those cancel. You're just left with 43 minus 18, which equals 25, and the square root of 25 does equal 5. So that is the correct solution, 43 over 7. All right, so let's look at number 2. So the radical on this one is the square root of 3x minus 8. So notice on the left side, the 1 is not circled, which means we need to move that. So subtract 1. Since we have it now by itself, we're going to do the opposite, which would be to square. And so square both sides. So those cancel. We just have 3x minus 8 equals 4. And then we'll add 8. So we get 3x equals 12. So x would equal 4. Okay, so we're going to check that. We replace x with 4. So that's going to give me 12 minus 8, which would be 4. The square root of 4 is 2. When we add 1, we do get 3. So that works out. X equals 4. And again, we are not going to have two answers on these because the exponent would always be a 1/2 or a 1/3 or a 1/4. Okay? So that top number would always be a 1. Alright, so looking at 3, circle your radical. The radical on this one is just the cube root of x. That 8 is a coefficient, so don't circle that. So that means we need to get rid of the 24 and the 8. First, you have to get rid of the 24. Then we'll get rid of the 8 by dividing. Make sure to carry down that index. So that would be 3. All right, now the opposite of taking the square root would be squaring, because that exponent's 1/2, so the reciprocal would be 2. The opposite of taking the cube root is cubing it, because that exponent would be 1/3. Reciprocal would be 3/1 or 3. So we get rid of the cube root, we're cubing both sides. So that just gets rid of the radical. You're left with the radicand, which is the term under the radical, which is x. 3 cubed, 3 times 3 times 3, you should get 27. So let's check it. So the cube root of 27 is 3. 8 times 3 would give you 24 minus 24, which does equal 0. So that is the correct solution. X equals 27. Alright, looking at 4, circle your radical. So it's just the square root of x. The 4 is a coefficient. So we have to get rid of the 7 and the 4. First, you have to get rid of the 7. So subtract it. Then we have to get rid of the 4 in front by dividing it. Now, since we have the radical by itself, now we can square both sides. So those cancel, you're just left with x, and then -1 times a -1 is a positive 1. So let's check it. Square root of 1 is 1 times 4, we just get 4, but 7 plus 4 does not equal 3. So remember, that's called an extraneous solution. You solve it, get your answer, plug it back in, and it does not work. So no solution. Alright, 5, your radical is the 4th root of 2x plus 3. So the 6 is not circled, which means we need to move it before we can get rid of the radical. So subtract 6 on both sides. You have the 4th root of 2x plus 3 equals 1. Since now I have my radical by itself, I need to get rid of the radical. So I'm taking the 4th root, which means we would need to do the opposite, which would be to raise it to the 4th power. So that cancels. We're just left with the radicand, so the term's under the radical. And then 1 to the 4th power is just 1. 1 times 1 times 1 times 1. Subtract 3. So x would equal -1. So when we're plugging it back in to check it, you would have the 4th root of 2 times -1 plus 3, and then plus 6 on the outside equals 7. So that's going to give me a -2 plus 3, which would be 1. So the 4th root of 1. The 4th root of 1 is 1, because 1 times 1 times 1 times 1 gives you 1. Plus 6 does equal 7. So the solution would be x equals -1. Alright, last one. Your radical is the square root of 7x plus 4. Okay, we won't need to get rid of the 2 and the 5. So first we have to add the 2. And then divide by that 5. Okay, so we have the square root of 7x plus 4 equals 5. Now I can get rid of the radical by squaring both sides. So I'm just left with the radicand. 7x plus 4 equals 25. So subtract 4. We have 7x equals 21, so x would equal 3. So when you're checking it, 4, so 25. So the square root of 25 is 5, but we have to multiply it by 5 in front. So you would get 25 minus 2 equals 23. So that works. So correct solution would be x equals 3. So this is solving radical equations. So once you have solved it, don't forget to check for extraneous solutions.